Need to order, roll call, Ann Rarick,
Ruth Lauer,
Paul McComb,
Bob Cicchetti.
Bruce, you say your name, please?
Bruce Button.
Thank you.
yay.
And Aaron, I sent you what I sent Claude as a heads up. I've got a couple of changes I'd like to make to the minutes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Go ahead.
And instead of trying to wordsmith this, I tried to mark mine up. And can you share it, Aaron, on the screen?
Yes, I will do that now.
Because what I'm hoping is it's just some additional and some wordsmithing. On the first page underneath approval of minutes, instead of duly seconded, I wrote voted.
Am I showing my screen? I'm not, right? Sorry.
No,
I gotta turn it-
it's not protocol.
Ann, could I just ask what's wrong with duly seconded? That's fairly
Because
standard.
we voted it.
So sorry, I lost it. Where did it go? I'm
Under
not
number
seeing the-
two. Under
No,
number
I'm
two.
not seeing the screen. Let me just,
Sorry.
Yeah, the screen is gone.
You
yeah.
see it?
now,
go.
yep, it's small. Let me,
I'll try and make it a little bigger.
oh, I can zoom it myself. Okay.
It was voted. We had an
Okay.
actual vote. So whatever. you
Oh,
want-
right, of course. It was moved, second and voted. Sure. Yeah.
And then under number three, I wanted to add some text that was not included in your minutes that I spoke. And I know I spoke it because I read from the notes that I had.
Here, I just want to say, I'm very happy to put it in and absolutely anytime that somebody has something like this that either they heard somebody say or they say themselves, I'm perfectly happy to do it. But I also want to say that as Ruth pointed out in the very first meeting when we discussed the role of clerk, the minutes are not a transcript. In fact, technically,
I don't care about transcript at this point.
no.
There
I
were
just
some points that I think needed to be made.
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely, yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Okay, so then on the next page, there was under the last paragraph in section bylaw discussion. Where
Well, wait a minute. Yep, okay.
Claude
Last
talked-
paragraph, beginning Claude,
Yep,
okay.
and
Okay.
there was a comment made that I think was worth including. I like you said, Claude, I'm open to other people adding or subtracting, but I'm just trying to make this a little simpler.
Sure, if you are going to put something there, which I would say is a tiny bit inflammatory, you should at least put the person who said it. So whoever said that, if they would like that to be in the minutes, it's perfectly fine for it to be in there.
I think it was Paul, but I'm not
Right,
sure.
right.
So if he doesn't want it in there, that's fine.
No, I do. That's fine.
Okay, so if you would put Paul said or Paul asked perhaps.
I don't care.
Yep.
I just think, I think it's a point. I mean, one of the reasons why we're bringing it up is that very point that he makes. That's all. And then under 5, the second paragraph, the last sentence.
Mhm.
she's
Wait,
scanning-
we just lost it.
Oops.
Okay,
Yep, 5, there we go. Okay,
Anita was letting us know about a project she was working on, which we all received by email. And she's scanning all the minutes for a whole decade and doing a summary, which is incredible, which we'll talk about in a minute. So those are the changes I wanted to make, and then the future meeting schedule. I wanted to just highlight the fact that the next three are going to be in person. And they're going to be at Kai's Road.
Okay, with those changes, that all looks good to me.
I would move approval as amended.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody not want them? Okay, great. All right. Thank you.
One sec, I have to find out who came while we were doing that business. Because I heard doorbells. Okay, Bill Moranchik is here
And Ned is here.
and Ned. That's it? Okay,
Any
thank
other,
you.
any other, okay, so under correspondence. Everybody got a copy of the project that Anita Techley did
Yes.
Yes,
and probably have not had a chance to fully digest it. But I did send her a thank you note. I think it was incredible amount of work that she did. And it's further information to use in our recommendations. Does anybody else have any other correspondence they want to bring up?
How about the correspondence from the town manager?
How about it?
Well, we weren't able to discuss it. I was wondering if it was going to be discussed.
I didn't put it on the agenda.
Well, we didn't have it in time to put it on the agenda. Right?
Right.
It came well before Anita's, about a week before.
Oh, you're talking about
Oh.
not sharing the survey.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
okay.
I'm
Well,
confused.
until further notice, that's what it is.
Next.
When, what date was this piece of mail? I seem to have, I thought you were talking about a piece of mail we received today. No, the town manager sent us a message.
She sent the task force and the select board
Mm-hmm.
request for not sharing the information until
Oh,
she got.
pause. I remember. She asked us to pause.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you. I'm
So
sorry, I was a little slow
as
there.
far as I understand, the pause is still in effect. And we are to continue that until we hear the details from the lawyer. So that there is nothing that can be, well, we'll leave it at that.
Could I have a follow-up question to Anita's project? I don't
Yeah.
see her here yet. Do you know whether she's anticipating speaking to us about her homework? Sarah?
She did not specifically say that.
Okay.
and I have not had
I spoke to her
conversation-
earlier and she's at another meeting. I
Yeah.
don't know where she gets the energy, but
No.
she's
I
at
don't
another.
either.
Yeah, she is at another meeting because my spouse is at the same meeting.
Yeah, so
for,
So
another
if
organization.
if you would like her to speak to it, please let me know and I'll put her on the agenda for our next meeting.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I have, as the next item on the agenda, the reviewing of just my draft proposal for the first couple of sections of the report. And I am totally open to your comments, your criticism, your edits, your additions, etc. And first
I
of all,
can run- I greatly appreciate you getting started on this. It's so hard to say, oh, this report is due on Wednesday, and we haven't started it yet. This, it might seem like a very long timeline, but that's all the more time to continue to work and polish.
yeah. Well, I just want to get a feel from you. This is not obviously the final, but are there things that are missing that you would like to see added?
Is this in,
This was in the packet
in the packet? Okay, got it.
and it its title was Draft Personnel Study Task Force Report, and with a suggested outline. And then behind that, after that, were the first 3 sections that I started doing some text around.
May I make a comment?
Yeah.
Okay. Again, thank you for getting started. The first thing that I stopped at was methodology. And, just more or less just for the giggles. Because if you recall, when we first started this task force, certain of those amongst us would call it the planning board instead of the personnel study
Me.
task force. It didn't seem to matter how many times we said it and corrected it, we went right into the trap. And here it is already in the very
Oh,
first
okay.
line of methodology. And it
Oh,
just
yeah.
made me grin because we're
Yep.
still tripping over it.
So it's
And then-
personnel board, yep.
Yeah. And then the very next line, we no longer have a board of selectmen.
Oh, right,
We need to tidy that
Okay.
up.
yeah.
And then those are my nitpickers, but when I get down to discussion, that's where I want to hear much more.
Okay,
You use the phrase transactional and strategic. I think I'm a slow learner, I won't grant you that. I need to hear more. I need to hear examples and illustrations. And you do a little bit of it, but I need more to make it.
it would be helpful if you, I'm trying to be brief, but I hear what you're saying. So anybody who's got some ideas on that regard, send me what you have and I'll play with it.
Unmuted. Okay, thanks. I guess I have a question about what we're doing in the report. My understanding is that we're actually going to make specific recommendations as to bylaw changes. When I read the charge, that seems to be what it's asking us to do. So I've already started drafting. I mean, I shared starting in January some of the ideas. At what point, should I share that document with you and then we could put it on the agenda perhaps for next time? Again, it's just kind of a shell. And happy we obviously need to vote on it section by section and things need to be added, but I just want to make sure to confirm that that's ultimately where we're going. Yours looks like a great introduction, background, methodology. I really like it all, but ultimately I think we need to get into the meat of it.
Your point is well taken, and I totally agree. But I do think we need the context setting.
Yep.
And that's what this is all about. So I'm
Great.
trying to keep it short, but at the same time, kind of start at the big level and work our way down to the detail level. And if anybody's got other ideas about how we ought to approach it, so be it. I'm imagining that this is not more than 1 or 2 pages. It's not meant to be the recommendations themselves, but it's kind of the big picture, kind of what's
Mhm.
going on out in the world and how it's influencing our town.
But we're at a sticky point insofar as if we look at the last paragraph on the page, on the other hand, beginning on the other hand, it's talking about long-term goals.
Yeah.
Who knows what those goals are? Who's been setting the goals? This is sort of out of the blue. And we have to have an understanding of the Society of Human Resources Management says that HR needs to be approached from a holistic view and supports employee-centric service and so forth. But those very people don't know about that yet. So
What very people?
the people that this paragraph is talking about. Have we, who has decided what the goals are? Who has decided who
We
are the
are.
goals
We're gonna,
setters?
we're gonna sit.
So, how am I going to set goals? And how is the HR department going to be approached from from a holistic point of view? We all have to be included in the discussion to say, is that what we agree with? And I
That's-
think we do and we will, but they have to be invited to the table.
That's the whole point of having this conversation.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and I think what feeds into that is ultimately the idea of what gets decided where. What should be decided by the town manager, what should be decided between the town manager and the personnel board, what should be decided by town meeting. And I think if we move toward, I think what I've been hearing from some of the meetings, a more robust role for the personnel board and perhaps more flexibility in implementing it, I think that's the idea of how you get to those goals, to sort of give people a structure that allows them to work more nimbly, as I think somebody else said.
But
Good.
what about, and I'm just, fussy here, sorry. But what about the state that we're in now, which there are so many aspects of the bylaw that former personnel board members and current personnel board members have been telling us are not operative. So how are we going to say, are we the ones who are supposed to say bylaw number, 4 or 6 or 10 should be implemented to the most robust degree, and bylaw, and I'm just making this up because I don't know what is covered, and bylaw number 2, we can ignore that. We need
Well-
more discussion than that.
Yeah, I could either do it, if people wouldn't mind, I could share my screen and again, give you kind of a first draft, which talks to some of your points. Is that okay?
Yes, for me, because I like this, whose
Sure,
job it is.
sure.
You gave us that nice table. So we
Um,
need to look at that, whether we agree with it.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Obviously, this all has to be, okay, so I'm sharing the document. Hopefully you see that. Do you see the document that has draft changes in blue at the top?
Yep.
Okay, so some of these, I took from the discussion, some of these are just sort of a first idea, but we talked last time, Ruth, when you brought up section 3, we brought up this idea that we want to make sure employees have access, make sure there's notification. And so we're clarifying that. And I think based on what we discussed, this captures, and it even captures the idea that if it's not felt by the town man, and again, the way the bylaw works, and so that's the wording I'll use, by town manager, it means the whole town manager function, including the HR director and so on. If the town manager does not think of it's a significant change, it gives the employees an ability to still put it on the agenda of the personnel board. So if we're happy with that, that's something we could vote on later. So this one gets to the point of some of the things that former and perhaps current personnel board members say just isn't really accurate in the bylaw. It could very well have been accurate in the last century, perhaps in the 60s or 70s. But for example, allocation of positions to classifications. And this is where the bylaw isn't consistent. In many of the cases, the bylaw says, okay, the town manager should do this for approval by the personnel board. But then in other cases, like in classifications, it basically says, hey, the personnel board member should do this. And it says it very specifically. It doesn't say with the support of the town. So it really is talking about what currently is a fiction, where the personnel board, assuming that they have the expertise and the time and the ability to actually do the things that are written in there. So the change is actually not that drastic a change, and it just reflects current practice, which is to say, all of those things, none of them disappear, but it's the town manager who does it for the approval of the personnel board. So I'd be very comfortable, talking to that. And, if the committee as a whole, if the task force as a whole is comfortable with that, that's a way that we could change that. So I think in terms of the things that we can do, I think those are actually, number one, it's good that they reflect reality. And number two, it really sets up a much more consistent writing of the bylaw. I mean, I was noticing and looking at some of the old documents that, you know, a lot of things need updating. There are things that talk about the town manager referring to him as a he. There are other things that have been updated to say he or she. Well, actually, that isn't the most recent way to do it, because you're actually excluding other people and you're basically saying non-binary people can't be. So I know those may seem like, you know, nitpicks, but if we are given the task to adjust this, I think it's a great opportunity to clean up everything in the personnel bylaw. Now this would be a judgment, again, subject to discussion and debate. But the question is, right now, the classification and compensation plan has to go to town meeting. Is that essential? Or would it be better for that to be put forward by the town manager for approval by the personnel board? And then perhaps any changes, you know, would be in the personnel report, which would be submitted to the town perhaps in advance of the warrant closing, so that if there really was a town objection, there would still be a mechanism to do that. But there are probably more important fundamental strategic things that would be better to focus on than the details of the classification and compensation plan, which are currently the only things that go to town meeting. And the big picture things kind of aren't even talked about. Going to what else are we talking about? So that's the compensation plan. Again, this is another section where the town manager establishes for approval by the personnel board. And then this is sections 11 through 20 is actually, you know, fairly substantial change, which again, subject to discussion and approval. But right now, all the details, which exactly the holidays are, you know, what they are, all of that's in the bylaw, which means to change it, you have to go to town meeting. So in a sense, it doesn't protect employees. It actually holds them back a little bit, because 80% of our full-time employees can have things changed, whereas 20% of the full-time employees covered by the bylaw have to wait until town meeting for changes to be made. So Anne actually suggested after last meeting that I talked to the HR director and town manager to get a sense of what flexibility would be helpful. And what I came up with as a sort of start is to say, okay, we obviously have lots of different things, you know, vacation, leave, family medical leave. But when these things are changed by state law, federal law, we then have to update the bylaw. Wouldn't it be more flexible if we, with all safeguards in place, you know, making sure employees are notified, employees have the ability to bring things forward, the town is notified and so on. But if we have the ability of the town manager and personnel board to actually implement these things well in advance of waiting for town meeting, knowing that, you know, if something comes up in February, it's actually April the next year before you can actually change it because the warrant's closed. And then the final one, the employee ombuds, I kind of cleaned up that suggestion, which I know is one possibility. I know that there's another possibility that we could perhaps offer as an alternative or instead of the idea of having somebody, Paul's brought up a couple of times about the idea of an employee actually sitting on the personnel board. That would, in a lot of ways, form the same sort of function, the idea of having some sort of representation on the personnel board. So if everybody's comfortable as clerk, I'm happy to keep this document as a live document. And as we decide things section by section, you know, to keep editing and modifying it. And then this could, after Anne's introduction and context, this could then be the body of the report, if that works.
And then I would, the one thing I would also add is, and you can see what some of those changes are that are coming up at town meeting beyond just the compensation and the rate, the status on the warrant. For example, Juneteenth has been a federal holiday for what, 2 years?
And so we would have to still wait another year if it's on the bylaw, as opposed to if it's in our policy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the fascinating thing is that it actually, and I don't know, I've been away from the personnel board for quite a while, but my take, because it's become increasingly difficult to hire and retain, my take is that the bylaw is probably becoming more employee friendly. So the last thing we want to do is slow it down, allowing different types of leave other than vacation and family medical leave, allowing time off for other reasons. That's not in the bylaw, and that's something that perhaps might want to be added and so on.
And redefining what family is.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Paul, you first, then me.
Okay, I guess my initial reaction was if we were gonna be having conversations with the town manager and HR to develop something under 5 and 6, why did it get assigned to me? And why wasn't I a part of that conversation if we're putting pen to paper? Now, I want to be very clear about this. My feelings aren't hurt, but I have spent a fair amount of time, and I will be making a presentation today on my assigned pieces of 5 and 6.
Yeah,
So,
my comments, yep,
I'm not finished, Claude.
yep.
If in the future, if we're going to have discussions on aspects that we've been assigned pieces, it may be helpful to discuss that prior to a meeting or during a meeting, so that we're not spinning our wheels. Because if we've developed a whole thing in speaking with the town, which I think is great. I mean, we should talk to all parties. It seems I'm not sure of the continuity of how we're doing this. Is my only case. Is my point.
Sure. It wasn't 5 and 6. That was the topic of the conversation. It was actually 11 through 20. 5 and 6 is actually, as people may or may not remember, I've actually been working on this since January, and I actually put that part of the document together in January, involving just a start off suggestions. This is well before anything was assigned, and that was just, my initial take on adding some flexibility. The only thing it was is essentially changing the requirement of it going to town meeting, and also cleaning up the sections that instead of it saying personnel board does this, it says town manager does it for approval by the personnel board. Absolutely no conversation all about 5 or 6.
Right, but I go back to the comment I made at the time was that we seem to be developing the document before we've developed the document. And there's
That's what,
Good point, Paul.
yeah.
Ruth,
I'll still give my 2 cents worth.
Yeah. I
during the
think,
meeting.
I think what Paul's next comment is going to be is his assignment for the bylaw. Everybody had something. I had a couple. I can't remember what they were, and I spoke to them.
you had the PPPs.
Yeah, there were two bylaw sections and the PPPs. Okay, Paul had a difference. Everybody had a different piece. Bruce has something about 1985 and so forth. What I think Claude is referring to is he stepped through the narrative of the bylaw and made his suggestions. Now the rest of us are doing our assignment. And I think what we need to focus on is coming to some tentative agreement. Claude has his version laid out, ready to go. Once he gets into a stage where, Paul has done his homework, Bruce has done whatever, Anne had done hers. We've all heard our own opinions, but we haven't heard other people's responses to our work. So once I hear what Paul's talking about, I'm going to have questions, I'm sure. And his goal is to get tentative agreement on his work so that we can fold it in to the entire document. And then Claude will be able to take out the strike throughs and leave only what we've agreed to, which may not be on paper yet, because some of it, the recommendation might be no longer a bylaw, this belongs in a policy. And then do we have to write that policy, or do we simply have to make a recommendation that in the next iteration, either the town manager or new personnel board will write a policy. Nobody ever said we were writing policies. But that's where we might make our recommendation. In any case, I am anxious to hear.
So that is what my contribution was today, which is just to start the conversation about setting the context and hopefully getting some tacit approval to the direction of that context setting. And I'm not going any further because I can't assume what you're going to report.
But you are assuming, right, that the next thing we add is the summary of findings and recommendations.
Yeah.
And that would be what? The, any changes or
I think
refreshing?
it would be kind of the highlight of any of the themes that we say. For example, Claude, you had a good matrix that talked about what belongs on the planning board, what belongs on the,
No. Not the planning board.
excuse me, personnel board. I keep doing that.
Yeah,
The personnel
it's
board,
supposed to
the
music.
town manager, and the select board. And we might have that as one of the main themes. And another one might be something about moving some of the things out of bylaws into policies to make them more flexible. And we could point out which ones. I don't know what it's going to look like yet completely. And I think we're still forming it. That's what part of the homework assignment was.
Yeah. No.
I could show that, I could show that matrix very quickly, just for 2 seconds, and then I'm happy to send it to you if you want to incorporate it. It was just this. This basically, says that 5 and 6 currently always need town meeting vote, classification and compensation. And for example, these 3 articles, articles that are imposed, the one article, Article 6 of the town meeting, actually changes section 12, 13, and 14. And again, it's changing very specific things because those specific things are mentioned in the bylaws, so they need to be changed. And this is where I think we kind of want the flexibility that you talked about.
Right.
Okay, let me stop sharing. Sorry.
So are we ready to move into Paul's presentation?
Yes, please.
You're up, Paul.
I started with, pardon me, I started with looking at the, I'll call it the 1985 document, personnel department document, and comparing it to the 2017 current bylaws document. This is for sections 5 and 6, my assignment here.
Yep.
Doesn't appear, they're fairly similar. The 85 is a little more general. The latest one is a little specific. Nothing really jumped out at me. Both documents direct a periodic review of the classification and job descriptions. That makes both of them, so they're not conflicting. I can't see any indication where that's done or has been done in quite some time.
And that shows
So-
up in the summary that Lita did.
Right, so it's just not done, but it's in both documents. If someone can jump in and tell me, I believe the last comp classification study was done 14 years ago. I think that's what we were told at the last meeting. I recall it because I was there, and I've been retired for 12 years. Maybe something's been done in between, but my at least from the information I have at this point, our periodic review, which would be the compensation classification study, was done 14 years ago. I don't know if the job descriptions are up to date from the old 14-year study. I did have some communication with Amy, and she nicely tried to incorporate it in something I could see in a cloud, and it just didn't work out. We couldn't put it together. So I haven't reviewed sub classifications, and nor should I have to. It just seems to me that all of these things that seem to be said should be current, should be covered. That's all. Under 5.3 of the 2017 document, that's the allocations of positions to classification.
Look,
Hold on a minute.
wait,
Terry Ackerman, can you mute yourself?
no, I would say she stepped away. There she is. Okay.
I came back. I heard you. I went out for a minute.
Can you mute yourself?
Oh, mute myself. I will.
Because there's background noise. I thought it was you, because that's the only one that was open.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Paul.
All right, under 5.3, which is the allocations of positions to classifications, there's a reasonably clear path of what is required. Paragraphs in the bylaw indicate that the Personnel Board shall review what documentation is provided to the Personnel Board by HR to review. So that's floating out there. Seems reasonably clear that documentation should, the present bylaw is saying documentation should be provided for the Personnel Board to review. 5.4, the periodic review of the classification plan. Again, I go back to, I think it was done 14 years ago. So it's enough said on that. My recommendation with respect to these two sections, that they need minor tweaks to the process, but major additions needed to ensure the Personnel Board is given data and timely documents well in advance to study any changes and recommendations. And there's some fairly, operational major things that happen over the course of the, HR's process through the Personnel Board and back out. There are changes to the organizational chart. There are changes to potentially who's reporting to who. Pretty important stuff. Given all that, I highly recommend a checklist that's created that documents the documents that are needed that go before the Personnel Board. They're presented to the Personnel Board in advance of taking any action. The last Personnel Board meeting was on February 24th, and it wasn't anything major. It was adding 2 new positions and some change in the organizational chart. That seems to be it's moving in the right direction. I don't see any of that prior to, but I could be wrong, prior to the February 24th meeting and back meetings. I think a checklist that's mandatory, that things have to be put off, job description has to be in, has to be submitted prior. Classification has to be checked off. Does it affect a current employee when it's changed? And I'll get to that a little bit later on. I think there's flexibility for the Personnel Board to make midstream changes if necessary, and the town meeting can confirm it at its next meeting. I'm not so sure there's anything hugely needed in that respect. We're going down to 6.2, moving from 5 to 6. 6.2, amendments and compensation plan. My feeling was the section seems generally adequate. 6.2. 6.3 would generally seem adequate with some changes made to the criteria suggested that the Planning Board take into account. The glaring problem with this section isn't the body of the section, it's just that it isn't done. I don't see where anytime, and I can, if I'm wrong, I'll cede to that. But if there's documentation or there's something for the planning board, the oversight, I see the personnel board as being a planning board. I did it in. My turn. I see the role of the personnel board in a perfect world as being some oversight. And I think that oversight is needed. I know it's needed. If there are things that the personnel board should be able to see, if we're creating a new position, well, does this position exist in another town? Well, what's their job description look like, et cetera, et cetera. Documentation so that the personnel board in advance can make an intelligent decision. And it's part of the checklist. All of these things are done so that there's never any question what needs to be before you go into a meeting. Section 6.3 states it shall be being the old cop side of me, there is may and shall in laws.
Yeah.
May arrest means you may arrest. Shall arrest means you shall.
That's very good. I love it.
It's actually pretty simple. 6.3 states it shall be a responsibility of the personnel board to review rates of pay at least every 3 years. I don't know what it should look like, but it doesn't appear to be done at all. Whenever the personnel board reviews the compensation plan, again, I'm still quoting, whenever the personnel board reviews the compensation plan, it shall take into account and give such weight to the following. Now, in the 2017 document, there are some criteria in there of the things that could be used to be reviewed that likely need to be adapted and changed due to the current workforce. I think much of this is very important in regards to retention of employees. It's not laid out exactly in section 6, but the compensation schedule means what people get paid. And what people get paid is an aspect of why they stay. So I think staying on top of this is a very important function of the town. Our retention, if we are, Claude mentioned earlier, and he's right, something about, getting employees and keeping them, our retention rate is abysmal. We have lost over 50% of our employees in the last 5 years. That's a fact. And it's continuing this year. These are not people that retired. These are people that left the employ of the town and went to work somewhere else. And it's documented. I think we're on a path, and maybe this is what people want, but we're on a path where institutional knowledge is going to be very scarce in Concord, because people are leaving. Seasoned employees are getting up and leaving. And there could be a variety of factors for that. So the compensation schedules, I think, are really important. I'm going to give a specific example of this. There was in the last few months, there was I don't know, I guess you can call it an emergency presentation made to the personnel board regarding the line staff at CMLP. And the line and it was put in under section 10.3 because it was such an emergency. And I understand, because as it turns out, my understanding that our pay rate with the line staff was grossly below what other communities were, and we were losing people left and right. It was said to me that we went from 9 first-class linemen to 3 over a short period of time. which isn't even adequate to staff and to handle what CMLP has to do. So we have a problem in that compensation swing. One of the main reasons they left was pay and not keeping up with the current market for them to do it. Now, I guess an argument could be made, well, if there was more flexibility for the town manager and it didn't have to go before town meeting, that may occur. The only problem is that's not what occurred. There was a meeting well prior to quite some time ago where there was a meeting with it's not the town manager now, but it was with the town manager, the HR director, and senior member of the line staff that went before them and it laid out a lot of problems that were losing people left and right due to compensation. So that was quite some time ago. Lots of time to deal with it. What did they do? Nothing. Zero. So our emergency occurred where we lost more people. We lost a lineman to Reading, who got a pay raise. He got promoted within the system of CMLP, and he gets his pay raise. He gets an addition. He gets a pay raise for his promotion. It took 5 months for him to get that pay. 5 months.
Yeah.
From the time of you, okay, whoever you are, here's your promotion. You're now working. He got it retro, 5 months. To me, that's unacceptable. When of all the things that I've analyzed and looked at, of documents that are out there that people can analyze for compensation rates for other communities, nothing is more available than the light department. The MEAM report, MEAM, it's the Massachusetts municipal people that are that have municipalities, and I think we talked about this before. This is the most, it couldn't be a better document. It says what every single municipality, every grade of line person is made in all of these 40 some odd municipalities. It's right there. It's produced every year. We contribute to it. We contribute the highest level of the pay scale for each lineman. That doesn't mean that's where they're at. They could be mid-range. But what we contribute to that report is the top range of that scale. So we look a little higher than we really are. If you look at all of the other cities and towns, their compensation rate for their contribution to health insurance, and I know that's the elephant in the room and that's not our purview, but we're the lowest. I think there's one other town that's as low as we are. All the other cities and towns are primarily 100% union. I think we're the only one. There might be one other one that isn't union. And I'm bringing all this up in the specificity of it for a reason. I asked a very senior member, a very, very good employee of the CMLP a while back. So if this is the case, and we're behind the curve constantly in our compensation rates, why don't you guys unionize? If they're all union, why don't you do it? And I don't particularly like unions. So, but I asked the question, why don't you go unionize? He said, we saw what happened at the CPW when they unionized, and they're starting at square one. And everything needs to be bargained over a series of years. And it takes years with unions to get up to speed on getting bennies and trade-offs. And it's kind of an adversarial relationship in the beginning. And he said, basically, we're not even going to bother. It's too much hassle because all we have to do is leave. that's their out. I don't have to work here. I can make more money somewhere else, and I can get better benefits somewhere else. And that's what's happening. That's what has happened at CMLP. It's because something didn't get done. Now, halfway through a year, where it's an emergency because there's very few people left to keep the wires up. Under section 10.3, it's brought to the personnel board. Now, section 10.3 is the incentives and reward section. It is not appropriate for a regular pay raise for an employee. It's a reward thing. It's a one-time, if you look at it, and I think this is something I don't understand why it was used. It was like, well, it's an emergency. We're losing too many people. I'm not going to apologize for this comment. It's because the ball got dropped before. When they're going in to talk about classification rates and compensation rates, not the compensation rates specifically, you have all this information. It's done every single year, and yet we're halfway through the process looking for a 3% raise that they're going. It's going to be retroactive back to July 1, but they're going to lose it. Some of them are going to lose it come this July 1. So the 9% pay raise that they're up for isn't really 9%. Some it's 6%, other it's not. We're going at this the wrong way, folks. I'm very cautious. I understand. I think in theory, Claude, you're probably right on, nimbleness and being able to do things. In practice, it troubles me a great deal because a lot of these things have been brought up as time goes on to the leadership in this town, and nothing happened. And that's where we are. I think we ought to strengthen the process a little bit, clean it up so that people have to do what, pardon me, they have to do what they're required to do or should be doing in the first place, is having documentation, looking at other cities and towns, input from, part of my checklist, I thought that the department heads, if something's changing within, say, CPW or police or whatever it is, the department heads are checked off. They're aware of all of these, the documents that are going before the personnel board. So to the end, I have a concept I want to run by everybody.
Anne is muted. There you go.
Paul, can I just interrupt you and ask you a question about, oh geez, it's just going out of my head. It has to do with what the last comment you just made. It was about,
Department heads who have to be aware of.
yeah, what were you saying there? Department heads do not know what is going before the personnel committee?
Oh, I'm not saying they don't. What I'm saying is the personnel board will be assured that everything that's being put to them has been, people down the line have seen. Alan Cathcart signs off on, yep, I agree with this change in this, and I agree in this classification, so that everybody is on the same page. This stuff is very important, that there's no miscommunication. That's
So you're saying that the managers need to be reached out to by the personnel board.
if
I think it's recursive. I think the managers reach out to personnel reach out to managers to ensure that everybody knows what's going on.
Right.
It's not a one-way street.
Yeah, okay, that's all I wanted to make sure.
But
and I-
Paul, I have a question as well. I think it's relevant, but maybe not. Other boards and committees, first of all, they meet monthly instead of, some meet more often than monthly, but they certainly meet more often than the personnel board. If they're on a monthly schedule or more frequent, select board, for instance, they have a process wherein something is, for the large part, is not brought to the table and voted on and shelved in one effort. Something is mentioned, there's paperwork, there's discussion, and it's held until the next meeting at which there is a vote. Sometimes it's appointments and nominations. Sometimes it's a discussion of purchases or, how we're going about doing business. It's a two-part algorithm so that there are no surprises. When you come to a particular meeting and something's on the table, you've heard of it before. And maybe that would be helpful when we're planning what that schedule would look like for the personnel board, so that the personnel board has documents in hand, whether it's given to them by HR or whether they create it. They have the full story of what they're going to be considering, and they have an opportunity to discuss it. And employees learn what's on the table. We've had another component of, if there are changes that affect employees, they will be informed. This is having this two meeting aspect aids in that process as well. And what I don't know, whether it's specifically for these pieces, these sections that you're talking about, or whether we should be looking at the whole process as no surprises. We talk about it, we fully discuss it, and then later we take a vote. It seems to me it would help the situation. It wouldn't solve it,
Right.
but it certainly would help people know what's on the table.
Good idea. Plus, some of my thoughts are that if they know what's coming, if there's a reclassification or if there's a change in something that requires the personnel board to act on, they have it beforehand.
Yeah,
They know what's going to come to them. They know this paperwork is coming, a job description is coming, et cetera, et cetera. And it becomes a perfunctory process where they can make a decision, not just that night, like, gee, that sounds good, and move on.
well,
I-
it puts them in the position of saying, oh, there's no job description here. Well, we can look at that next month, instead of, oh, it's a rush, it's a hurry. Whether or not there's a job description, I need your vote. That doesn't work for me.
Me either. I don't see the problem with having something ready to present it to the personnel board. I haven't seen anything that's so earth-shattering that's not going to take, it's just a checklist. This, and this has to be done to do this. So everybody's informed. And I have a minor solution here.
Oh, yeah.
I have a concept that it doesn't solve all issues. It started with a suggestion from Bruce and looking for an organizational chart for the town. And then it has morphed into, I think it would be very helpful and not a big deal to create and or maintain an organizational chart for the town. A flow chart, an organizational chart in the block that says deputy chief. It says Paul McComb. And it says what my pay classification is. Doesn't say exactly what my salary is. That was one reason I asked I had one of those questions on the, I don't even want to say the word. You know where I asked that question. Ruth gets it.
I got it.
Okay, that's one of the reasons I asked the question. So I narrowed it down to, so in the organizational chart, it's Paul McCombs and deputy police chief, and his pay, his classes, whatever the heck it was, say MP3 or whatever. So now the entire town is laid out on a flow chart. Who works for who and how much they make. So the personnel board now the first thing I see them reaching for when there's any change or any other board that's discussing changes, they open up this org chart. They see if there's a person in the slot already. And if there isn't, it's a great way for anybody to look up and see what the vacancies are in the town. Or is there a reason why that slot isn't being filled? Well, it's, you know, it's under consideration to change it to something else. Okay. But it just seems like a simple, easily maintained, should be available on the town website piece. Just open it up and there's your town. How many employees you have, how many people are filled, what classification they have, and the personnel board can just look at it and say, we're making a change here, we're making it, and then adapt it. When somebody leaves, I don't see a big deal in just deleting the person out of that org chart. Have HR just, whoever maintains it, deletes it. And so it's open for that time being. I just think it's a great visual thing that people can look at and see how the town runs, who's in it, who's in that slot, and what classification they are, without having to go looking at 4 different places to see what lines up with what. And this started with Bruce, so if you don't like it, we'll all blame it on Bruce. So
I'll take the heat. Simplicity, I love it, Paul. Let's go.
that's a concept that I just want to throw out there. The other thing I think we should look at is our longevity as a joke, as far as retention of employees. It's terrible.
Paul, do you have all of your recommendations in writing? So you can share them with us?
I do. I'll have to clean them up a bit because I have notes.
Yeah, it would, yeah.
Written all over it, but yes, I can clean them up. And
I realize I'm trying to capture everything you said and I don't.
It's very meaty. There's a
as long
lot
as you
to
don't,
it.
as long as you understand that I do not have the writing skills that Anita has, or some of you folks.
What
So,
she did, yeah.
Now,
Yes,
there's
one thing, Paul, if you have finished, could I ask one question?
Yes.
Thank you. I think what you gave us was very meaty. There's a lot of detail. It fits in a nice plan. At any place along the way, for instance, longevity, did you think that maybe this should not be a bylaw? It should be a policy so that we can change things more? Word of the day is nimbly.
Sure.
In my opinion, it seems anywhere there's a number, a dollar sign, it really needs to be someplace where we have faster access than town meeting to town meeting.
Yep.
Just a thought.
I think it's a great thought, and I think Claude had a very good point earlier with respect to, I think we can trust, the town should be able to have the flexibility to decide on holidays.
Mhm.
And decide, this is my opinion, that's all, just I think that's a good idea. I don't think that do we really need to, have that approved and be nimble with that? I don't think so. I think there was one other one that, and now I've lost it, but a couple of things that you brought up, Claude, I agree with you with respect to, I don't think they need to be in the personnel bylaws. Military.
Write that in your recommendations then.
Okay, it doesn't have to be, okay, all right. That's pretty much it for the moment. I know there's a lot there. But I did look at this very carefully and very methodically, and I've spent a great deal of time talking to employees, not just trying to have them tell us what they think we should be doing. Really working on this so that we don't get hung up in a few places that we are hung up in now.
Thank you.
That's it.
Could I say, Paul, I thought that was great. If you'd like, I think it would be neat, you know, what I liked about it, and you've said some of these things before, and I've taken it on board, the idea that the personnel board needs more information, and it seems like a perfectly good idea to put that into the bylaw so that, as you say, make sure that it happens. And not just, you know, issues that we might consider minor, but major issues, strategic issues, like, you know, a report on retention, a report on use of consultants, you know, a report on hiring and turnover, you know, that sort of thing. And what Ruth said, I thought was a good idea. I mean, if the committee, and if I get the sense of the committee, we're looking to make the personnel board more robust, having more meetings on a more regular basis certainly makes some sense. So if you'd like, after I get your document, I know, you know, I'm kind of walking a fine line because we obviously can't have a meeting outside of a meeting because of open meeting law. But if you send your document and that's distributed, I can try to put that into a bylaw, you know, wording, and put it somewhere that basically says, you know, so that we could start have a discussion more on what you said of they should be getting this document, that document, and so on a regular basis. So I thought it was really good.
Thanks. I can easily, I can clean this up. I do have it in the computer, and I can clean it up a little bit.
Okay.
And I'll get it out.
We're gonna have to put this all in writing at some point anyway.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Bruce, did you want to add anything?
Nope.
Okay.
I'll have my stuff next time.
And it really would be helpful to have it ahead of time so that we get a chance to sort of mull it over a little bit.
You'll have it.
Great. Great. Thank you very much. Ruth, do you want to start with the PPPs or not?
I have not put anything on paper of the ones that were missing. I will say that thanks to a lot of research that Aaron has done and some people, some employees who are savers, we managed to find a lot of the documents that are no longer on paper. We have paper copies. So I am finding more of the PPPs. I will still say overarching, my recommendation is they need to be refreshed. They need to be updated without trying to wordsmith them myself.
Right.
You know, simply pointing out the areas that, you know, language hasn't changed while state law might have, and so forth. They're there to be updated.
Yeah,
Bruce,
and following on it.
Go ahead, Claude.
Oh, thanks. Following up on something Paul said a few weeks ago, you know, the idea of taking those PPPs and turning it into an employee handbook, that's something else that could be put in the bylaw as well. You know, just to make sure that employees have something to grab on, they should obviously have a copy of procedures and policies that apply to them.
Yeah.
Good point.
I remembered what I forgot. The one other thing I want to say is somehow in the analysis of where we are in the compensation game with other towns and with other municipalities or private sector, I reverse engineered the comments that were given to me about CMLP. I think we should be looking at, or the personnel board should be looking at, other contracts that cover the same organizations that we have. We are incredibly unique in that 60% of our employees are non-union. Maynard, and I learned this from talking to Aaron McCloskey when we were doing this, they are just entirely union. There is nobody that isn't in the union. Every administrator, I found if you want to see what I think is a really sharp website with a ton of information, is look at Needham.
And what? Newton?
The town of Needham.
Needham, yes.
Needham. 10 point. It's all right there in front of you. It's not clunky like ours. And the HR, job descriptions, click, every single one of them. Dated, they were updated.
Yep.
Just bang, bang, bang. if we could just scratch Needham off the website and put in Concord and put our data in. Look at Needham, but there again, they're all union.
The what?
They're all
union.
union.
Wow.
So I think it's an important aspect for our managers, for anybody that's recommending pay raises in our compensation rates, to look at other towns' union contracts. That's what I forgot to say, because we need to compete with them,
Mhm.
or they're going to leave, and they are.
Well, one of the things that I think we did hear or see in the employee survey was the whole question of health insurance, and you brought that up.
Right. And I do want to give a shout out, a thank you to John Harris. I called him when I was trying to get the process of what the trickle down effect of the money is, of how it gets into the system every year. You know, how has it come up with that? You know, there's a 2.5%, structure.
Yeah.
And you know how that gets done, and he explained it, and it sounds very well done, between the FinCom and the. I think where we're lacking is our end of it, of being able to argue we need this, and this.
Yeah.
To stay current.
Yeah. Good. Is there any new business you want to bring up? We usually go for an hour. We've gone over a little bit. I'm gonna be sensitive to that. Okay, well, our next meeting is April 25th.
I'm sorry, is there any public? Is there any comment? We have public.
Okay. New business, public, either one? I don't see anybody.
Okay,
So our next meeting is the 25th. And Bruce, I'm assuming you're going to do your presentation?
I should. I'm looking at my calendar and I have to drop some people off at the airport at probably 3 o'clock. So that may be I'll see if I can finagle a way out of it, but
Well, usually okay.
usually I what?
If they're, I misunderstood what you said. You have to drop them off at 3. Their flight isn't at 3.
5:30.
Yeah, okay.
I'll see what I can do. I'll make it work.
okay, so next meeting is a hybrid. We are going to be
We're going to
at
be at
Kai's
Kai's Road.
First
And Glenn,
floor.
were you trying to say something?
Just
Okay.
confirming that it was hybrid.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And Kai's Road? Okay.
Yep,
First floor.
on the first floor. Come in, take a right. Actually, take a left and then the right.
No,
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
See you in
you.
2 weeks.
may I say aye?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Can we move to adjourn?
So move.
Oh,
Thanks,
well,
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Erin.
Erin.